We're ready,
All
Mr.
right.
Brennan.
Thank you. All right, welcome to the June 2nd, 2025 Policy and Standards Committee of the Texas Indigent Defense Commission. Megan, could you call the attendance?
Yes. Mr. Alex Brennan,
Here.
Mr. Jim Bethke,
Here.
the Honorable Valerie Kobe. I've seen that she's here.
All right.
Richard Evans.
Here.
Mr. Brennan, we have quorum.
Okay, great. So first item is approval of the minutes from August 19th, 2024. Is there a motion? Jim, you were there. Can you make a motion?
Yep, I'll move.
All right. I'll second. All in favor of adopting the minutes? Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
We'll take your word, Alex.
Yeah, I know you weren't there. Judge Maderi was, but I think she's busy. Okay. Wesley, you're going to make some opening remarks.
Sure. Well, thank you, Mr. Brennan, and welcome to our new members, Judge Evans and Commissioner Covey. So I think this is your first meeting, as you just alluded to, Judge. So the reason staff asked for this meeting today is it flows from a webinar that presented some analysis done by the January Advisors Consulting Group. They did a big analysis of the distribution of attorney appointments by the Harris County District Courts and their relationship to campaign contributions to the judges. And flowing out of that meeting was a discussion about, well, what could be done about appointments and appointment distributions. And so from that, a recommendation was made to TIDC to consider changes to the way that we analyze the fair distribution of attorney appointments in our policy monitoring. So with that in mind, Jesse Tyler, who works for the Harris County Public Defender's Office as a researcher, will present briefly the findings from that January advisor group, along with some of her own analysis and a recommendation. I'll then run through our current processes for reviewing appointment distributions, as well as a few options that you might consider to change that process. I'll then briefly summarize our contract defender program rules and a proposed amendment to those rules. Joel Lawrence will then give us some background information on Harris County's appointment system, as well as attorney caseloads. And then we'll return to consider the two staff recommendations related to distribution analysis and the contract rule amendment. And then depending upon where we're at time-wise, we have also included our usual policy monitoring update, as well as our once-a-year risk assessment and planned monitoring visits for this year, as well as some data analysis coming from the Indigent Defense Expenditure Report with attorney caseloads, attorney payments, as well as attorney appointment rates. If we get to those by the top of the hour, that would be great. Otherwise, we'll bring that back to the full board at your meeting at the end of June. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Tyler to give her presentation.
All right, thanks, Wesley. Sorry, I don't know, even after years, I can't quite manage to work this technology. So yeah, I think Wesley did a good job explaining how we got here. We went to a presentation by the January Advisors Group. It was back in March. It was a webinar, and they, have three basic conclusions. So they say money talks in court appointments, which is this part where they're saying that the amount of campaign contributions for some courtrooms looks like it's correlated with the frequency of appointments. I am not here to defend their work, their study, their method or process getting to that conclusion, but I can only assume that this chart is done correctly. And the second thing they found is public defenders get better outcomes for defendants. I am more than happy to defend that and have been for the last decade for Harris County. And then the third thing that they found was really more of a question, which is what can be done to increase oversight and accountability. And they have three suggestions. The first one being expand the public defender office in Harris County, and we're working on it. The second is expand the managed assigned counsel office in Harris County. I know they've been trying, that's kind of outside of my purview. And then the third is that they suggest accountability and transparency with open data and regular reporting. And guess what? We already have it. And so the interesting thing to me at this webinar was that there was a question about, how do we sort of stop even having the appearance of impropriety of appointments and campaign contributions being correlated. And I had already been kind of working through what I'm about to show you for a totally separate project. And so, I thought that it might be kind of a seamless solution to, the problem that they have here, because it looks like they're the first folks to, discover that there's some kind of difference in appointment rates by the actual courtroom instead of the court level. But we've kind of been discussing that for, I don't know, it feels like decades, but I haven't been working that long. So maybe just one. So I'd already been looking at the data that TIDC provides online. It's open public data, and working through these measures of the top 10% of lawyers not taking more than 3 times the share of appointments. And right now this is done at the level of proceedings. So for Harris County, it's district courts, county courts at law, and then the juvenile district courts. We've got 3. And I was thinking that, just math wise, there may be a more appropriate way to approach figuring out if folks are getting more than whatever their fair share is as currently defined in the administrative code. So I am going to walk you through what today's measurement shows, and then I'm going to talk about the concerns I have, and I'm going to throw Harris County under the bus as being an example. And then I'm going to talk through some solutions, which is basically where the presentation with January advisors ended. And then I talked to Wesley and Joel about it. I don't know, I'm going to say 2 weeks ago, maybe a little bit longer. And then just leave you guys with, the opportunity to think through if some changes would be helpful to anybody. So right now, the top 10% of lawyers in the district courts get about 3.26 of their share, a little bit higher for the county courts at law, and a little bit lower for the juvenile courts. So basically, anything under this 3 times share would be in compliance. Anything over would be out of compliance. And so it looks that Harris County is just barely out of compliance at the court level. But I'm totally happy to be generous and hedge these overages. I don't know if these lawyers were on the list for the entirety of the year. I'm sure that not all of them were. I also don't know from the public data if these cases had a second share, but I do know that that is something that happens, especially for the higher felony level cases. And there's no way from just the TIDC public data set to see, how long the lawyer was actually on the case. So, I could be appointed today, and then my client's grandma may show up and hire them a lawyer. And then I'm, have a voucher that gets processed, but I really didn't do any representation. And I personally, and I'm sure others do not think that that's fair to count that as something that is my share, right? Because if I get appointed again to replace that case, the public data is going to look like that's 2 appointments, when in actuality, I've only represented 1 person. So hedging is possible. But the concerns kind of remained, hedging or not. So right now, we're looking at the whole, and we're assuming that the parts are equivalent to the whole. 1 pitcher is going to equal 8 totally same full pints, but anybody who's been to a Saturday afternoon college football game knows that that's not always right. sometimes this pitcher gets poured out in a way that we have some in compliance and some completely out of compliance and some, under. And so when we pour these back in, the variation or non-compliance is going to get washed away when we measure the whole. And what this looks like for the district courts is this. So we saw the top 10% of lawyers get paid for 3.26 times their share. I've only got 2 courtrooms in which we're under that average. And I have 2 other courtrooms in which we're double that average. So this makes me a little concerned about the hand waving that I was willing to engage in earlier at the district court level. And at the county court at law level, we see the same thing. I've got 2 courtrooms that are under the average, and I've got this one that's 167% above the average. And I'm sure that there's, maybe something that I'm missing because I'm not in constant talks with the managed assigned counsel office, and they are the ones that are distributing lawyers into these courtrooms. We've also got so many courtrooms in Harris County, it's likely and would make sense from a scheduling aspect that lawyers are not taking cases in all of these courts. They'll split them up by floors or teams or whatever the MAC wants to do. And then I'm kind of seeing an opposite problem at the juvenile court level, which is, so here's our average, and I've got this one district court that's like well below the average, and this one is, sizably above the average. So we end up with the opposite problem where if we say, hey, the juvenile courts are out of compliance, this one, that hand waving probably works. And we're missing, the opportunity to have this court share best practices with these, and probably unfairly, singling out the court level when this judge is, following the standards set in the administrative code. And I know that you're asking, well, isn't Harris County some kind of outlier? And yeah, it is, but it also isn't, because I, have access to statewide data from TIDC. And I'm finding that this problem is not just a Harris County problem. And I don't mean problem like it's problematic. I mean that I've got 17 counties where the district courts in the whole are in compliance, but I've got at least 1 court that's out of compliance. So there may be something happening here that would be important to look at. And maybe once you look at it, it's not really a problem, but, something is happening, and those January advisor folks may pop in and, bring up the same issue later. And then I've got, this is our sort of the problem that I said in the juvenile courts, where I've got 11 counties where the district courts are found out of compliance based on the measure, but at least one of them is in compliance. So we would have, someone unduly punished by being included in the whole, even though everything's going right in their court. Now, I do want to, hedge again. There are some counties included in these analyses where, like Jefferson, they have a contract system, so something else is happening. And we'll loop back into that later. And probably the MACs, are also included in here too. But, there's some solutions that I think would be pretty easy to implement. And I'll just jump into those. So the first solution is probably the easiest to implement, which is don't do anything, right? Maybe it doesn't matter. We've been working with this since 2009. And I know that it's only one of many measures that the policy team looks at when they go into any kind of county. And so all of these measures are in conversation with each other, and being able to get a breadth and depth of explanation as to why it looks like this but is actually something else is something that data can't do. And that's the point of going and speaking with a county. The second is to have some kind of tripwire that would say, hey, the whole is in compliance, but maybe the parts aren't. I think that this is all fine and good for a collegiate exercise, but it requires doing recommendation 3 anyway, so you may as well just go with 3, which is to analyze the distribution of cases by the appointing authority. So in some places that's the courtroom, in some places that's the managed assigned counsel office. You know, in Jefferson County, like I said, they've got a contract, so that's kind of you know, a third option. I think that you know, this metric was written in 2009, but we've got, you know, more TIDC staff, stronger computer power, more knowledge about maybe what we should be doing. And it's super easy. You can do it in Excel. I did. It took, I don't know, 45 minutes. So it wouldn't even be that big of a burden, you know, to measure at the appointing authority level. And so who cares? Well, January Advisors cares about Harris County. I've already been, you know, sort of mentioning this as being something that I found problematic. So anytime I report this out, it's probably going to be done at the appointing authority level into the future. So it's not going away. I can say not many people are like trying to put me on headline news at 6 p.m. So, you know, grain of salt as far as how far that'll go. And TIDC and PPRI. So I know that there's updates to the data collection agent. I think that we even mentioned that's going to be talked about later. But to me, it should be pretty easy to automate. Whether or not it's front facing, that's up to y'all. It may just be something you know, worth considering into the future with policy monitoring. And you know, everybody, do they care? I mean, perhaps it is a pretty apolitical solution to what the January Advisor folks found. I don't know how far they plan to go with that. I do know that you know, the smaller counties, and by smaller, I mean 128 counties have only one district court serving them. So they're already analyzed at the appointing authority level. And this just sort of broadens that out to the other counties that would be served by more than one court. I've also got, you know, 43 counties that only have one county court at law. I don't know if their county constitutional county court is also hearing cases. So I can't promise that 200 counties are only served by one misdemeanor court, but at most it's 200. So so that's it. You know, we had this conversation with some of TIDC a couple weeks ago, and yeah, my kind of end point was that I thought, you know, this was a good opportunity with you know, new computer resources and a redesign of the website and data collection agent anyway to, you know, kind of minimize the opportunity for these trends to be washed out by looking at the court level instead of the appointing authority level. So that's it. But if you have any questions, and not about the January Advisors actual analysis, well, I can kind of answer those, but again, not here to defend that. So I think I ran over time, so I'm just going to end this and stop sharing. And yeah, if you have questions, I'm here.
Thanks, Jesse. Well, with that, I'm going to kind of explain how we do it currently. It is slightly complicated. Megan, if you go to page 31, this page is kind of 2 pages into that presentation. Our current rules, the way we assess the distribution of appointments, and this is in assigned counsel systems, managed assigned counsel systems, as well as short-term assignments, which are technically contracts of 1 week or less. And we'll give you some background on how we encompass those as well in our analysis. But we always the staff looks at the share of appointments represented by the top 10% of all attorneys accepting appointments. And then an attorney is presumed to be in compliance, a jurisdiction is presumed to be in compliance if at each level of proceeding, felony, misdemeanor, and juvenile, the percentage of appointments received by the top 10% of recipient attorneys does not exceed 3 times their respective share. This is probably our most confusing administrative rule. And the easiest way to think about that is, imagine a circumstance where we analyze a county and there's 100 attorneys who received appointments for, say, felonies. that year, and 100 who were on the appointment list for the whole year. So Jesse gestured to that. That's one of the things. They need to be on the list the whole year. We look at the top 10 attorneys in that system. And if those 10 attorneys receive 30% or fewer of the total cases assigned, then they're presumptively in compliance with the fair distribution of appointments statute and our rule. So there's a couple of 3 options at least that we've come up with that could potentially we could shift to, and this is the bottom of page 31 is the first one, which would be to amend the rule to require distributions to look at the individual trial court level if only the individual trial court has appointing authority. So if there's other folks, typically an indigent defense coordinator who not associated with an individual court makes appointments for that court level, we would analyze them as we do currently. We would look at all the felony appointments together, not by court. So that's one of the options. And as we'll note, many medium and larger size counties do have indigent defense coordinators or others who make appointments in some cases at least. The second possible option would be to require the appointment distribution system to be analyzed based on whether individual courts or another appointment authority made most of the appointments. So in systems where there's 2 appointment authorities, we would try and look at who made the most. So if we would look at the individual court level, if the trial courts made most of the appointments, and we look at the court level, all felonies together, all misdemeanors together, if individuals not associated with the trial courts made most of the appointments. There are some challenges we foresee with this methodology. It could be difficult to determine which system is used primarily, because a lot of places have an indigent defense coordinator who makes initial appointments at or following magistration, and then later in the process, individual courts may make a significant number of appointments in the process. And at least under current practices, we typically only look at the first determination of indigence, since that's what we use to determine whether they're timely in their appointments as well. So it's possible that could be an issue. If we did get direction to go this route, we would be looking to see, through pre-visit calls and interviews with local officials to try and determine which system makes most of the appointments. If we did have this kind of a rule, it could have the effect of encouraging jurisdictions to have other appointment authorities in the trial courts, which could be earlier appointments from a centralized wheel. We see typically indigent defense coordinators appoint early in the process from a centralized wheel, and so appointments could be faster. The third potential option would be to leave our rule in place that we look at the court level, felonies, misdemeanors, and juvenile cases all together, but you could direct us to go ahead and include findings. We call them additional observations, typically in our policy monitoring reports. If we find that there may be issues with the fair distribution of appointments at the individual court level, if we discover them ourselves, or if there's reliable sources, we could include that notice. So, and in fact, this is the approach that we're going to recommend. We'll come back to the recommendations a little later, but dealing with our current open policy monitoring review in Harris County, it just happens we have this review open. It's a follow-up review. And in fact, they were found compliant with our distribution analysis on an earlier review. And so it's actually not even under review right now. We're still looking at timeliness issues were the main things that were still pending from the prior reviews. But we would, under this approach, include additional observation, noting those findings and suggesting the jurisdiction look at implementing new appointment processes to avoid the appearance of impropriety. And of course, the fourth option, as Jesse said, is to leave the rule the way it is. We look at the court level, felony, misdemeanor, juvenile. A couple of notes on these. Jesse did mention this. Most smaller jurisdictions only have one court at each level, so they effectively are already being looked at the individual court level. So this rule would only deal with counties with multiple courts at each level. One of the issues that we've identified if we do try and go to an individual court level review is that we may need to look at the presumed threshold for a compliance for individual courts. Because as you'll see, even if you have a neutral third party making appointments from a central wheel, the distribution of appointments won't be even between the courts, and there's all kinds of reasons for that. So we do think we may need to do some more research on what an appropriate measure might be at the individual court level, if y'all are interested in going down that path.
Hey, Wesley,
Yes, sir.
I have a question. So you prepared a motion about this, which I understand you don't want to take up now, but
Right.
it just requests additional research. Do you even need a motion for that?
I don't know if we need a motion. If the committee is interested in exploring TIDC changing its rules and going to an individual court level review, we would like direction to do
Okay.
that.
Well,
If y'all
then,
just want to stick with what we've got, then we don't need to do any additional research. So that was the thought process behind that.
okay. Well, and the timing on this, would you come back before the next full board meeting, or this is something we would?
I think given that where we're at on the calendar and the fact that, we need to get a board meeting book out to y'all in 2 or 3 weeks, and I think this would need to come back to the committee. I think it would be late summer before the end of August board meeting, if y'all did want to pursue an individual court level
Okay,
change.
that answers my question.
Okay, great, thank you.
Hey, Wesley, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can, Commissioner.
Hey, this is Valerie. Hey, I was just wondering, kind of to frame it a little bit differently. It seems like a lot of places there are fewer and fewer attorneys trying, available. And so that may be part of the issue. But are we, at the beginning of the conversation, I heard cases were being distributed to people that gave money to their campaign. So is that a defined issue? And secondly, if not, then we're just looking at how many give cases to the same firm, same team. And that may be, the numbers can mean a lot of different things. And so I wasn't really sure if we'd looked at how cases are distributed to judges, not every judge in Williamson County has the same caseload. Some have family, some have civil, and percentages are different for different judges. So I wasn't really sure how that played into the numbers. So I was trying to define define the problem a little bit better before we go forward. I mean, obviously, I think talking to individual counties is going to get us better information than just looking at the numbers. But I wasn't really sure. Could you explain that a little bit better for me, please?
Sure, I can try. So we don't look at campaign contributions. That's not a factor. It's not a factor we're suggesting. I think it was really just the jumping off point for that group and Ms. Tyler to come back to the way we do assess the distribution of appointments. The issue is the statute requires that appointments be distributed in a fair, neutral, and non-discriminatory manner among available attorneys. So that's kind of the catch-all statutory requirement that we're trying to quantify in this assessment. So that was the basis in 2009 of the board adopting this distribution analysis.
Wesley, is that in total for a firm or per judge?
We look at it, I mean, it's by attorney. So we're looking at the distribution of appointments among available attorneys, and it's by court level. So we look at all felony cases together. And to your other point, we don't really factor in or look at, what share of cases one court hears that are criminal versus civil or family. That's not relevant, since we're just looking at all the attorney appointments for felonies and how those are distributed among attorneys. So we don't really look at anything at the individual court level. And maybe I missed it, but your point.
Wesley, Commissioner, this is how I understand it. So in some counties, you have multiple district courts, not just Harris County, but other big counties. And you may have some courts that are just outliers. Just imagine if one court just appointed the same 10 lawyers over and over and over again. That's not happening, but that would be a dramatic example. You might not catch that as a problem in our current method of review if it was washed out by all the other district courts and what they're doing. So this is just a way to capture outliers that may not be captured now.
So back to the picture of the chart, she broke it down by court. So are we saying that that court that are outside of the norm is giving cases to a specific firm, or just, I mean, what is, can we go back to that chart and kind of look at what that's saying, please?
Yeah, Jesse, you want to explain what?
Yeah. This chart,
Yeah,
Okay.
all three of them, I think, were handled the same way. So go ahead.
okay, yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure you meant this one and not the January advisors one. So,
No, that's good.
so this dotted blue line shows, for the district courts in Harris County, that the top 10% of attorneys, got 3.26 the share of all appointed cases. And so then these individual blue lines show, or bars show what happened within the court. Now, I didn't talk about this one. This is something called Rapid Integration Court. This is kind of one of the outliers that, Alex mentioned. What's happening in there is kind of a different process. But looking at all of these other ones, I think that the distribution, it kind of depends exactly on the court. I know in one of these courts, of 1,200 appointed cases, 400 of them went to one individual lawyer, which is concerning, not only because that lawyer is like 3 times over the weighted caseload recommended standard, but also because that's a quarter of the appointments.
Yes.
But then, in the other ones, like this one, where it's a multiplier of 3.16, I think that, some of the things that Wesley brought up and I talked about, and Joel and I have spoken about, like that, it's entirely possible that everything was done, randomly, as it's supposed to be. And, we just have lawyers that are, like second chair or, appointed and then, but immediately removed because the person decided to hire a lawyer, or, for whatever reason, they, just decided to not go on with the practice. And so my, original reason for looking at this metric is because we see so much variation, that I think that, especially because I think there were like 24, 25 courts in here this year, that it just sort of washes it away. Right. So we're not going to see like this court or even these ones above 5, when you're saying, it's a multiplier of 3.3. But there could be something happening in there. Now, January advisors tied it to a phenomenon that I frankly don't think is, if it's an explanation, it's not the full explanation. But there's some other explanation, I think, that should be, kind of looked at. And maybe it's completely neutral, and this, top 10% of lawyers 3 times their share is just no longer the right measure. Then again, maybe it is, some type of, I don't know, something that should be looked at. But
Jesse, I agree. It's the outliers are unusual here, perhaps until you find out, until you dig a little bit more, you don't know, because numbers can mean a lot of different things. What's interesting to me is that they have a defense team as employees, yet they're sending that much work outside. And that is kind of concerning to me too.
oh, you mean the because we have the public defender office and there's
Right.
so the public defenders are not included in this analysis. This is only the cases that are going to appointed counsel, because when the public defender is assigned a case, the determination of who takes the case is up to the supervisors and team leads within the office.
Yeah, no, but yeah, and so our concern wouldn't be that it would be in the other department of the
Uh-huh.
of that county. It would be that they're sending it outside. But my point is, how many cases are actually having to be assigned outside counsel, as opposed to, because I think one of the suggestions was increase your public defender's office, correct?
Correct. And we are, in process of hiring more public defenders, and there's sort of two parallel issues with the expansion, especially when we look at the district court level. One is that we have also seen a huge increase in the number of cases filed in district court. So even as the office has continued to hire more lawyers for the felony division in the trial bureau, as the universe expands, it looks like that the public defender isn't growing. It is growing, but the whole universe has grown.
Right.
And then the second kind of competing issue is, I think especially prevalent when we look at the district court, is that there are only so many lawyers that have enough experience to come in and start taking these high felony level cases that would also be looking to take a job in the public defender's office. And so we, do poach. Well, that's probably a terrible word, but I mean, we can hire from other public defender offices around the state. But really, like, the best sort of process, and there is a lag, would be to home grow lawyers that are capable of doing these higher level felony cases, which means hiring younger lawyers, but starting them in the misdemeanor division and then having them pull up into felony as they get more experience.
Well, I
So
think that's one of the big problems, because I know that in Wilco, I mean, they'd much rather hire the 20, 30, 40-year-old, year attorney than teach someone and grow it up. But I think we're going to have to, because we just don't have, and then they retire and then you don't have anything. So,
absolutely.
that was the whole point of having different levels of salaries, was that you hire somebody straight in from law school and then you teach them. I think that's one of the problems that we're seeing. I know we are, and I would assume others are too. And we can poach, but there's only so much to poach. So you're going to
Yes.
have to, we're going to have to train up. So anyway,
Yeah, I mean, I work primarily in Harris County, but I, look at the data from all over the state, and we've seen, I think, a decrease of like 29% in the last, what is that, 8 years, of lawyers that are, willing to take vouchers. And there's also been, just at the, state bar, which that data is not particularly robust at a public level, but, there's been a decrease in lawyers, going into criminal justice type work, and a decrease in the number of lawyers that are board certified in criminal law. So, that there's like the pool of lawyers is shrinking, the number of lawyers, working in these areas is shrinking. And on top of that, at least in Harris County, there's also this increase in the number of cases that are being filed at the district court level. So even as the proportion that qualify for county provided counsel stays the same, since the universe is larger, it's just a struggle.
exactly. I don't know that I don't know that we're going to get to the bottom of it until you do talk with the counties back to what do we do next. I think that maybe we take a few, and there's some of the 254, there's probably a few that are like this, the top level. Is that an accurate statement? I mean, obviously we're beating up on Harris County today, but they are kind of an outlier with 1,000 courts that they have.
Right. I mean, I work for Harris County, and that's
Yeah,
why Harris
I know.
County has gone
I know.
right under the bus. It's just
I
because
know, I
that's
know.
where Yeah, like when I work for like doing stuff to prep us for budget, like that's who I'm looking at. But I do see. Let me see if I can
I
share.
mean, I'd love for you to look at Wilco and see where we are, because I'd like to see what we're doing. I can see the bills that we're paying
Yeah,
for.
I mean, I did work in Wilco back in 2015, so yeah, I'm decently familiar with well, at least what you guys look like a decade ago. So yeah,
Different now. Different now.
what, like 8 times larger,
Yeah,
largest
yeah.
growing county in the
20
state.
years ago, we had less than 200, about 200,000 people. Now it's over 700,000. So yeah,
But so
which
I've
doesn't
like
sound like a lot, but it
I
is.
identified these, 28 um like district court levels where there would be at least something to look at. So there's these 17 where the district court is in compliance as a whole, but some are out of compliance. And then 11 where it's like the opposite, where the district court level is um, out of compliance, but there are district courts within that are in compliance. So if we were to measure those 11, there would be some courtrooms that are like, hey, I'm literally doing like everything right according to what the standard is right now. But like I'm getting a collective punishment. I mean, punishment I use.
Yeah, yeah. You're getting lumped in with everybody else. Well, so like in Wilco, we have 6 district judges, and 3 do criminal and 3 do not. They
Mhm.
have family and CPS cases and that kind of civil.
Right.
Everybody does civil, I think, because that's the thing that's growing the most. But anyway, would they get lumped in all together on
No, it would
this?
only be so the way that the data is structured, at least the public set, it's like this bar card number in this uh, court received, I don't know, 40 felonies and was paid $40,000. So those civil court would not even show up because they're not doing appointments nor
Right.
like paying vouchers for felonies in their courtroom.
For civil cases. Mhm.
Correct. Well, yeah, but they're not going to show up in that criminal set. I know that they would be, yeah, reporting in for the the CPS or whatever stuff. But yeah, like so the concern about like, oh, are we like spreading these out over courts that don't even have
Mhm.
the criminal cases? No, because they're like not going to show up in my data set at all unless there's some kind of like massive problem. But the
Okay.
work I think would clearly like show like, oh, I think that this county's just been mislabeled this court, but that I don't know has never happened. So I wouldn't.
No, thanks for explaining that. I appreciate it.
So Wesley, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple comments. First, Alex, really happy that you brought this to the committee's attention, and I really agree with kind of what Jesse's been saying. The commissioner, this is a complex issue, and I do remember the discussions, whatever, 16, 17 years ago on the top 10%, and I know Wesley does, and I think Joe, you were with us at the time. I unequivocally think that we do need to revisit that. I do think, and kind of as y'all had proposed, the staff recommendation I concur with. Jesse, great additional work and research on that. And I do think there's probably, reasons. My couple takeaways, one would be, since we do have the data by individual court, and we're collecting it statewide, I think reporting that out is critical. I know our enforcement sticks are not overly huge. We can withhold money, but sometimes sunshine will encourage, especially since we're talking about elected officials, can encourage, better behavior. And if they were legitimate reasons, then, they have nothing to worry about. But I do think before we kind of bring it to the full board, we do some additional and kind of building on what Commissioner Covey had said. Maybe we do, Joe, if you did a report for, say, the top 5 urban counties and include maybe Wilco and Lubbock, maybe do 10 and just show how that would look. I would leave out the pay to play, even though that's very interesting because it kind of gets people off somewhat on a tangent. But I definitely think we need to revisit it. It's not as simple, but I think if we talk about it at the full board meeting, it's I think we could spend 2 or 3 hours just talking and not really come to any, solid conclusion. This is almost, ripe for like when we're doing a strategic planning session to really kind of think through this, discuss it, and work with it. So real quick on Bear County, we do have central appointing. It's really our office. Where we will potentially see outliers, and we have, I know, another rule is when a court does appoint off wheel. We still have some of that because the court does have authority to make assignments, whether you have an indigent defense coordinator or central appointing authority. But I do think it's a good assumption that, hey, if you have central appointing, we could look at the whole court. But I do think publishing out individual court level and not making a statement as to how this is non-compliant or they're compliant. I think just, publishing it, I think would be beneficial, but I do think we need some more work before it's ready for prime time.
Okay. Wesley, were you going to add anything before we went to your motion?
Well, I mean, Joel did do some nice data analysis that complements Jesse's that I thought would be in.
That's fine. I don't want to cut him
Yeah.
off. It's just all the motion is saying is you're going to
Yeah,
do.
that's true. I mean, if y'all want to do the motion now, that's fine. But I thought, part of the discussion vetting would include seeing some of the additional data.
Yeah,
analysis.
go ahead.
I guess I'll hit the contract rules briefly. That's on page 36. And since a related topic, we've been talking about the distribution analysis. Well, in contract systems, we don't do a distribution analysis. And so it's based on contract rules, or for those where legal representation is procured by attorneys to a group of indigent defendants who are unspecified. So they're assigned, typically we see contract systems of 1 year in duration in one court, often in rural jurisdictions where they are just trying to get an attorney there. So we assess them based on whether they follow our contract rules. So no distribution analysis. You'd expect an attorney to get all of the cases if they have a contract for all of the cases for a year. So they just have to have a solicitation, a bidding process, and a written contract with caseload caps in it. That's approved by the Commissioner's Court. That's the nutshell of the rules. The thing that we noticed in looking at the distribution in Harris County is, in the district courts, is many of their assignments are through term assignments of 1 day or 1 week. So it's not a one case assignment system in many cases. They use these short-term, they're effectively short-term contracts. But earlier in the monitoring process in Harris County, the board decided to only apply the distribution analysis to terms of under one week or less. So basically, Harris County doesn't have to follow the contract rules for these short-term assignments. They get assessed under the distribution analysis. And what winds up happening is that distorts the analysis, because these short-term assignment attorneys get lots of cases. And so one of the thoughts we had, in addition to looking further at distribution analysis, is what about amending our rules to require that in these short-term contracts, they don't have to have the full contract, but that they do at least need to limit those attorneys to a maximum annual appointed caseload or workload for 1 week or less, and put that in their indigent defense plan. So that's a secondary suggestion. The rule language is at we would propose for the amendment is at the bottom of page 37 and 38. But before you even think about taking that up, I would like to let Joel do the background beginning on the bottom of page 38, because I think there's some pretty interesting analysis he's done there. That's okay, Mr. Bonner.
All right. Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about caseloads, appointment distributions, and Harris County's monitoring review. So TIDC was directed by the legislature in 2013 to sponsor a study to figure out the maximum number of cases a criminal defense attorney could reasonably handle in 1 year. And the Public Policy Research Institute at Texas A&M conducted this study. They found that a single attorney with no support staff could reasonably handle a mixed felony caseload of 128 cases in a year, or 226 misdemeanor cases, or some combination thereof. In Harris County in FY23, the highest felony appointed caseload, this doesn't include other types of appointments or other retained work, they received 4.5 times these guidelines. And the reason this is relevant is because most of these cases likely came from short-term contracts of 1 day or perhaps 1 week. And Megan, could you go to the next slide? There is a scatter chart. Thank you. So what our proposal would say is that every county would have to, if you have a short-term contract, set annual caseloads just like a regular contract system for 1 year. On this graph here, on the far left, you see the number of cases each attorney got. There were a handful of attorneys that received between 500 and 600 felony cases in FY23. And on the bottom right part of the graph, you'll see about 50 attorneys received between 1 and 2 felony appointments over the year. So this isn't exactly equal, but if they had put in place a caseload cap, let's say of 150% of the guidelines suggested by the Public Policy Research Institute, that's 192 felony cases, well, then people would be capped out at that level, and about 25% of the appointments to private assigned counsel would have had to have been redistributed. And so what that would mean is we would have fewer high caseload problems, and we would have a more equitable distribution of appointments. We are not saying that every county has to set a certain level of cases for the maximum amount. We're just saying that they would have to basically follow the contract defender rules currently in place for long-term contracts, for short-term contracts, and set a number. But if this number were reasonable, a lot of the problems that we see would be addressed. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, and this is something, you know, I'm pretty intimately familiar with. I will go ahead and make that motion that you have on the bottom of page 3. This, because really we set up a rule in Harris County, I remember navigated it. So they basically got an exception to the caseload guidelines. And I think this is a legitimate way to address it.
Thank
so
you,
I'll
Jim.
make that motion.
Do we want to wait for me to finish or just go ahead, Wesley? You're muted, Wesley.
I think that's the chair's prerogative whether they want to.
Okay.
You can finish up, Joe.
Yeah.
I just want to say I think that's a great suggestion you're making, because the one thing the county really doesn't want to give up is short-term appointments, because the judges love the idea of an attorney of the day or attorney of the week or whatever they're doing. But yeah, they ought to follow the rules. And
They got to follow the rules. So it's, this just jumps totally out at me.
Yeah. So this ends up being like, they may have over 100 short-term contracts in the year, and if after 100, it starts to look like a long-term contract.
Yep.
And so I want to just briefly now cover our 2016 Harris County monitoring review. When we went into this review, we intended to look at the fairness of the system under our contract system, our contract rules. But in fact, Harris County had some issues with that, because they said, well, is it really feasible for us to take all these 1 day and 1 week contracts before the commissioner's court so we can make an appointment? That's just not an efficient or maybe even feasible way to do things. And that argument won the day. I think this would address it. If we could go to the next page, Megan. So we ended up looking at the distribution of appointments because we didn't look at the contract defender rules. It wasn't because it was a best fit. It was just the default way of looking at this if we didn't look at the contract defender rules. And what at first happened during our analysis was that they appeared to be just the felony courts appeared to be narrowly outside our presumptive thresholds. We made a finding. They came back to us and said, actually, a few attorneys were not on the appointment list for the entire year. and they should have been excluded from the analysis. And that's how we follow under our rules. We exclude those attorneys. And with that, they were just narrowly under the threshold. And so we presumed that they had a fair, neutral, and non-discriminatory appointment system and haven't gone back to looking at the fairness of the system. When we look at the distribution of appointments in Harris County, there is a wrinkle in that they have two different methods for appointing private counsel. They have the short-term contract system called a term assignment, and these are either 1 day or 1 week contracts. Under this system, an attorney can get up to 5 appointments per docket. And then they also have an individual case assignment system. Now, the coordinators are going to try to fill up their appointments first with the term assignment attorneys. And then whatever's left over, maybe there's a special needs appointment or something that can't be covered by the term assignment, that goes to the individual case appointment. So if we could go to the next page, there's one more chart here. I'm not trying to pick on the 178th District Court. It's just an example that you can see what happens. So on the far left, you see 16 attorneys received between 20 and 200 felony appointments in FY23. These are probably almost all contracts of 1 week or less. And then on the far right, you see 95 attorneys that received 1 to 4 felony appointments. And these are likely almost all individual case assignments. And so when you mix them together, the distribution looks very uneven. That long tail of individual case assignments is going to almost on its own throw out the evenness of the distribution beyond our presumed threshold if you look at the individual court. Now, in 2016, when we did our analysis, Harris County had not yet had a way to separate these appointments in reporting. It's possible that they can do that now, but in 2016, they couldn't. So I think if you were to look at the distribution of appointments for them, these appointments should be separated probably by case type. As a whole, when you mix these together, please go to the next page, Megan. It looks a little bit more evenly distributed, not perfectly distributed, but some of those attorneys that received individual case assignments, they will get short-term contracts in other courts. And some of those attorneys that had short-term contracts in one court will then get individual case assignments in another court. And I'm sorry for going a little long. That completes what I wanted to present.
Okay, and you were also going to cover future monitoring visits?
Perhaps we don't have time. Maybe we should discuss this and have motions first.
Okay, let's do the so the first motion to conduct additional research to determine if TIDC's administrative rules should be changed to examine appointments by individual court rather than across all courts in a county, and while that additional research is being conducted, include additional observations and policy monitoring reports if staff finds issues with the distribution of appointment in the individual courts.
Yeah, I think, didn't Jim already have a motion on
I
that?
think
Yeah.
so.
Yep.
Is there a
Yep.
second?
I'll second it, Valerie Covey.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and then the second motion is to recommend publication of proposed amendment to the contract defender program rules in the Texas Register as they appear on pages 37, 38 of the meeting book. That's what we just discussed.
And I'll make that motion too.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Okay, all right. That's that. Anything else, Wesley? What else do we have today?
I mean, given we hit the top of the hour, maybe y'all want to stop, but
Yeah.
If you want to scroll through, you'll see what was going to come back at the full board meeting on the data. I'm sorry, Judge Evans. Yeah.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
I'm the new guy. So what is our end goal? We go through this process, or what do we do to a judge that is, maybe he understands quid pro quo, maybe he doesn't, whatever. But what's the hammer? What are we going to do? What's
Well, I think what's going to happen with the first part, the part about if we can establish by court rather than simply by division, who the outliers are. I think the idea was if we expose that, that might help. I don't know that we're going to punish anybody, but we can certainly point that out. The second part, though, I think is significant. The change to the administrative rule is that Harris County has been this outlier saying, oh yeah, you can have 1-day contracts, but you can have as many cases as you want. And all we're saying is we want to change that rule to you're just like everybody else. If you have a contract, you got to follow the rules. And that will go to the full board, I guess, next meeting, right?
That's right.
Okay.
And,
But
and Judge,
we have
and
no
Ju-
authority to take any action.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, we do. We do. We can threaten to take their money away.
No, I'm talking about a specific judge that's not following the rules.
Well, they stand, I mean, we had that in Hidalgo County. It was one judge, juvenile judge, that wouldn't listen. And when the entire county got threatened with taking all their money away, he got in line.
It has to be political pressure.
Yes.
In fact, that judge was defeated in the next election, and this was one of the issues used. I mean, that was almost a surprising effect. It actually really was quite dramatic. Yeah. So just exposing does make a big difference.
Well, sunlight has a great effect.
Yeah.
it does.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, then I guess meeting is adjourned.
That's
Thank
Penny.
you.
Good meeting, guys.
Thanks, Mr. Bowman.
Jesse,
Everybody,
thank you.
thank you.
Jesse,
Thanks.
thank you for your work.